Morning. I think I'm going to do a series on how we're designing our off-grid, low-cost, natural material, maybe, home, because I'm working on it in the evenings and there's quite a lot of challenges involved in it. Our main content is sort of following us along during the day. I'm a bit out of breath because I've just been chasing sheep from down the top of the hill back out into the farmer's land neighbouring us, and it's sort of us living here in the early days, what we do, I suppose like a video diary, but this stuff that I'm doing designing the house is a bit different because it's a bit more technical. It's not fully technical, right? I'm no architect. I'm a guy designing a house, but it's me with a computer, notepads, spending a lot of time marking, measuring up, and it's just the rest of the channel is all green, natural, day-to-day stuff. This felt like it didn't really fit, so I'm going to do a different series, and I'll bring you along how we work through it. We're early stages, so I thought I'd start it now. This video is an introduction, really, so that I don't just dive straight in with a video with a picture of a plan or something, and it just looks really out of place on the channel. So I'm doing this as a sort of introduction as to what's going to come in this series. We're still continuing the rest of the content. It's just, I thought there's not much of this on the internet, how people work their way through it. So I'll do that. Who am I and why might this series be of value? I think the reason I'm doing it is because I've got quite a lot of experience in the building trade. I had 10 years experience. So what was it? I was in the Air Force. That was the start with, and then I was in property in London, and I was on the marketing side and management side. So I had a little bit of experience in the boring bits, I suppose. Then my wife and I bought a building in Northamptonshire, which we converted to flats, and we built 4 new houses as well. There's 18 flats, 4 houses. We also built ourselves a flat in there. But we dealt with everything. I did all the plans for the planning permission. I dealt with all the building control officers. I sourced finance from banks. Family lent us some money. We also got investors. So we dealt with a lot of it. We got warranties. We also didn't get warranties on some of them and had the experience with that. We rented 9 of them. We sold, then went back and sold them all. Sold the houses, got new build warranties on the houses, got conversion warranties on the flats. We got management company, freehold, leasehold. We just did the whole lot. And I did it for 10 years. And I did a lot of the construction work myself. Not in volume. I had trades that helped me out a lot there, but I got my hands dirty doing a bit of everything, so it's like I had the full experience of it, even if I didn't actually do all the work myself. I had a good go at most things, so I know my way around how to construct, how to plan, how to get planning approved, how to do the building control inspections, what they look for, angling water inspections, warranty inspections. I've got a fair amount of experience with that. So perhaps designing a house from my perspective, given I'm not an architect or a designer in any means, but I'm an individual building design home, but I do have experience with this. And something I've noticed is that a lot of the eco homes, which are, by the way, there's going to be a lot of me talking in this video and in this series, the individuals who build these properties, the really beautiful, proper off-grid, proper earthen homes, don't have a lot of experience with planners, and the feedback I'm getting is that the planning authority around here are quite difficult, which actually isn't my experience, because we've got experience with planners, and generally speaking, I think the experience of getting planning permission is traumatic. If you haven't done it before, you don't know what to expect. You've got the stress of wanting this to go through, and it's your personal stuff. Whereas if you have experience with it, I actually find most councils are the same to deal with, and as long as you follow their rules, jump through their hoops, I tend to find they're pretty good, really. You just have to understand the game and not go, can I build this house yes, and they're like, no. So if you, yeah, I think from our point of view, hopefully it'll bring a perspective of a self-builder who perhaps knows a little bit about how to get things through and has the experience behind them, to design in a manner that will save some hassle with building regs. I've had most problems, to be honest. Building regs have been very good to us, but you know, I've jumped through the hoops of planners, and we know what building regs want to see, so we have that experience. Okay, so what are we dealing with here? What are we doing? If you haven't seen the We're Moving, we bought 50 acres in Scotland, I think that's what it's called, video, perhaps go and watch that, because I'll take you on a tour of the whole plot, or most of the plot. We have a fair, we get around a fair amount of it, but we own 50 acres in Scotland. We're in the Highlands of Scotland, and this bit you see here is the garden plot. We've moved up and we've lived here for about a month now, off-grid. We're dealing with all the aggros of that right now, water pumps exploding and all sorts. There's a grove beyond there, dumping ground beyond that, and then we have 50 acres, or I think it's, yeah, because it's 55 acres, so it might be 50 acres up the hill, halfway up the hill, a kilometre down that way, and the plot has 2 planning permissions already approved, which is why we bought the plot, because the risk for us was if we buy a beautiful place and there's no planning on it, the risk of there being no planning approved is very high. Whereas if we bought one with the planning approved on that we didn't like, amending that is a lot easier than getting brand new planning. So yes, we're lucky in that it has planning, but we chose this place because it had planning. So yes, it's lucky, but you know, we would have had to consider buying this place if it didn't have planning on it. We maybe wouldn't have done it. So that helps a lot. The planning approved for the hill is for reforesting. So all of that up there, we're planning on reforesting. There's about 35,000 trees we need to plant. Native woodland. That's going to be really fun. That's why I was chasing the sheep out earlier, because they eat my trees. The planning permission that's approved here is for a contemporary house. It's a nice looking house, but it's expensive to build and it's just not quite to our style. We applied for pre-planning advice, which I'll probably do a separate video on, because pre-planning advice is something really handy to get. It costs money, but it's less than planning permission, and what you're doing is keeping the planning officers in the loop. So you're saying, I would like to, what do you think? If you apply for planning permission and they say no, you've got a big red mark on your CV, your list, your property title, whatever it is. It's like if you've got planning rejected, I feel like getting planning approved is harder than if you apply for advice and they say yes but no, or no but if you change. So we've applied for that. They've said yes, they're open to an alteration on the design. We have to apply for another whole full planning permission, so we'll take you through that journey. But it's looking positive, which is why we bought the place, because we have had the advice so far. I think now right, what are we dealing with on the site? What problems have we got? What challenges are we going to have to overcome? The major one is how wet the ground is. It's just like, there's a lot of water. I don't know if you can hear the river, but the river runs all the way around the plot. And this section here is quite flat. The previous people who got the planning had a flood survey done, and as long as you're above 109.5 meters above sea level, you're out of the flood zone, so you're okay. So that hassle's been done for us. The location for the house is just here. It's on a slope. We could change it, but I think we're good. We like the location. It's a nice location. The design I'm working on at the minute works with integrating it into the side of the mound, but that is another challenge we've got to deal with, is this here, which is where the house is going, you probably can't see on a camera, but the difference between the top there and the bottom here is about 8 meters. So we're building on a slope, and I suspect that the reason there's a slope there is because we are on bedrock, and I just tripped over a piece of rock there, but I'll show you, I'll take you down the road, but there's a logging path they've dug into the side of the hill, just a little bit up from us, and you can see that what the ground's like underneath it, and the bedrock's really quite close. So I suspect that the reason this hill is this shape is because the bedrock's quite close. The water isn't able to drain away because there's rock, so it just runs through the surface soil, down the rock, and then pools in these bits at the bottom here. We're also in the bottom of a valley, so it's going to be wet, but moisture is a big consideration for us. Humidity in the air, not warm humidity, but I have steam on my breath. I'm surprised I haven't got it now, but steam on my breath most days, not because it's cold, but because it's moist. Like the air is really damp, so you breathe, like it looks like it's cold, but it's not. So we've got that to contend with, which is probably going to be our biggest challenge, is making sure the place is ventilated well enough. Which is another reason we're doing this series, because it's really we've got a lot of factors here to try and engineer our way round, and the solutions we're working on at the minute, I'm hoping are going to be quite interesting, because we're not just chucking money at the problems. You can do that easy, but we're trying to find solutions that are affordable and work, instead of just, you know, ticking a box in somebody's form, but in reality, does that really solve the problem? Should I go through the design now? Yeah, so what are our briefs? What are we trying to achieve here? So we want to be off-grid, completely off-grid. There's no water supply available here at all. Can't have it. Just doesn't exist. There's no internet. If you want internet, you have to get satellite internet, which we've got, Starlink, so you can perhaps see that video if you like. You see the power cables? Do you see the power cable behind me? Somewhere over there. There is power available, but our criteria was that we want to be completely off-grid. So we really don't want to connect to the power, to the grid. And at the minute, we're running out of power every morning. I have to get up and plug the generator in. I've got a 2-year-old, my wife, and she's pregnant, because you always get pregnant when you're doing a grand designs, don't you? And we're still absolutely certain we don't want to connect to the grid. So if that's the case now, I'm pretty sure we're going to stick with that. So what's that? Water, internet, power. I think that's about it. We've also got the challenge of solar panels. Don't really produce anything here. We've got 6 solar panels, 6 very powerful solar panels. They don't produce anything, so we're going to be doing hydropower. So that's the utilities. But what we want to achieve with our build is we want it to be as cheap's the wrong word, because cheap and value are different, aren't they? You can have something low cost and it's of good value, but something cheap is just cheap. So we're not going for cheap, but we're going for good value. And it's sort of a personal challenge for me, because the buildings that we've done before, they weren't expensive to build, but they weren't cheap either, because we were mass building flats in a block that we converted. I've also got experience with converting, and I've got experience with new builds. We've done both of those. But we want it to be cost effective, just because I think throwing money into, like, if you can have a home, right, and it's a cheap, a good value home, and you can have a home that's an expensive home. Something I've been figuring out recently is humans are incredibly adept at adapting, right? And it's amazing, because you find yourself in a really difficult position, and I mean that as in, we're not in a really difficult position, we're not. But for example, we've moved from a huge flat with very, very nice everything. It was the one I made. It took me years. It was hardwood everything. We had polished white concrete floors everywhere. We had 2 cars, all the services you could want. Nice office. We had a gym. But you adapt to that, as in you get used to that. and then we're in a static caravan, which is the size of our gym, and we've adapted. So you just get used to your environment, and I think that's one of our biggest problems is our adaptation, because global warming or any of those problems, financial crises, interest rates, we adapt and get used to it, which means we can be put in a difficult position by circumstances, and then we just accept it. We might grumble to start with, but then it becomes the norm and you get used to it. So what I'm finding is that if you have a house that's good value, or you have a house that's very big and very expensive, if it serves your needs, that's important, so as to serve your needs, then ultimately you adapt to fit your space. You know, fish, they grow to fit the fish tank. So if you have a really expensive home, okay, so the point I'm trying to make here is cost has nothing to do with how happy you are in your home. Nothing to do with it. That doesn't mean that a nice house doesn't cost some money, but what it means is the actual price has nothing to do with it. It's about the elements of the home, it's about how you feel in it, the energy of the home, it's all those other elements. And yes, those do cost money. I'm not trying to say that you can get it for free, but the cost itself, isolated as cost, does not make a difference. So when you think about that, making one of good value makes sense, doesn't it? So we're approaching it from that angle. And I suppose I'll take you over a little bit of the design now. I'm not going to spoil the future video by going into it in depth, but so we said we're going natural, we want to go eco, we want to go off-grid. We've done living walls in the past and we've done living roofs in the past, so we've had a bit of experience with that. And what we're going to do, I'll probably try and stand at the top and show you. You can tell I'm really technical. I've pinned the house out with bags and buckets. So there's a bucket. Can you see that bucket? No. There's another bucket there. There's a sandbag and a bucket there. One there. And then there's this bit here. So imagine right now we're standing on a pathway which goes up to there. There's all the concrete. Down here, this is the front door. This is the porch, and then it's a rectangle that goes down there, and it's going to be single story on the front, and as it goes out there it's going to become two-story and go down into a sort of, it's not a basement because it's going to be above ground, but it's a it's a step down into the bottom of it. The reason it's rectangle at the minute is because I always start my designs with a blocking out, so I kind of come up with the minimum room sizes and what types of rooms we want, and I arrange it on the plan and then come up with a sort of total volume. How big is that? In working through it, we're now not going to go square, we're going to go for round or sort of circular with a tortoise shell roof. So this is I'm quite looking forward to this. It's going to be a really really cool design, but we're going for straw bale walls. We're going for timber framing structure, which I'm going to use the fallen trees over there, mill them up to make the structure for it. Hay bale or straw bale walls, earth render. We've got some experience with Tadlac and Moroccan lime plaster, which are natural plasters. Lime plaster on the outside, stonework. I was going to try earthen floors. But it's that type of build, right? So the challenges are going to be, how do we air seal the straw bale house? How do we get it past the thermal regulations? How can you deal with thermal breaks? It's like trying to match, if you're just trying to build a straw bale house, a lot of these projects on the internet show a small hut, which doesn't have to pass building regs. It might even be temporary and they might pull it down. If you're trying to build this and get it past regs, but not only for the reg's sake, I want it to perform. So it's not about, I mean, you have to get it signed off, that's just a have to, but I want it to be a good house. I want it to feel comfortable inside. Airtightness, it's a shame because I'm not sure that airtightness is the correct way of measuring the well-being of a home. It serves purposes, but then it creates other problems. So it's not a perfect solution, but perhaps it's our best solution for mass building at the moment. So how are we going to make sure that having an airtight place breathes properly, retains its heat well enough that it's comfortable, but doesn't make it some kind of hot box that you can't get any air out? So we're going to try and navigate all that. And in the next video, in this series that is, I shall take you around perhaps the early design stages. You might sit down by the computer, have a look at the actual layout on the CAD software, and we'll perhaps go through some of the finer design considerations such as drainage channels underneath the basement retaining wall, drainage channels underneath the hay bale bases, stop any water wicking up, all those kind of technical details that are quite challenging for me to work through at the minute and affect how you construct the building, because you need to come up with these solutions now, so you don't apply for planning permission for this, you know, tortoiseshell lens roofed roundhouse, and then you're like, oh man, I need to add an extra 50 centimetre for the depth of hay bale that I'm intending on using on the outside, so that we don't have cold bridging on our timber framing, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we'll go through that in the next video. And yeah, I hope you find this series of interest. It's certainly fun for me. I love designing this kind of stuff. That's why I do the CAD CGI drawings kind of for a hobby, because I love coming up with new ideas. And this design, by the way, is version 20, I think. We've gone through, so one of them had an underground koi carp pond that went under. There was like an internal courtyard that was internal because it had glass on the top and all the walls, and then it had a koi pond that came into it, flowed through the bathroom and then through the kitchen out into the outdoor koi carp pond. So yeah, I've come up with a lot of crazy ideas. This one's less crazy, this one's more practical, but we're really trying to connect to the earth and the site. So I hope that's something you find of interest. If it is, come join us in the next one. We'd like to see you, and we'll see you there.